We're going to do a quick warm-up problem in this video. We're reviewing some of the skills that we talked about in the last section because we talked about a lot of stuff in the last section. So if you haven't done so already, I would recommend taking a moment to pause this video and try some of these problems out on your own. You should be able to do all of these problems if you've worked through and taken notes on the videos from the last section, but take a moment just to try these problems out, and then you can come back and check your answers in just a moment. But I'm going to start working my way through these. So the table below shows a random sample of musicians and how they learn to play their instruments. I've got whether the individual was self-taught, studied in school, received private instruction, and then we've got piano players, guitar players, and violin players. Part A says, what is the probability that a randomly selected musician from the survey studied in school? So if I want to say, okay, a randomly selected musician from the survey studied in school, well, I have 95 total individuals that studied in school out of a total of 192 individuals in my survey. So 95 out of 192, if I wanted to give a decimal for that, would look like 0.4948, rounding to 4 decimal places. So that one's relatively straightforward. Let's take a look at our next example. Part B, it says, find the probability that a randomly selected musician from the survey plays guitar. So from my survey, I'm choosing from, again, the total number of people within my survey, 192. So out of the 192 individuals, we had 59 guitar players, so 59 out of 192. Again, if I wanted to get a decimal there, that would look like 0.3073. Let's move on then to part C. Find the probability that a randomly selected musician from the survey plays guitar and studied in school. So now I want to talk about the individuals that both played guitar and studied in school. So here's the individuals that played guitar. Here's the individuals that studied in school, and I can look at this and say, well, there are exactly 24 individuals that both played guitar and studied in school. So my probability there would look like 24 out of, again, I'm selecting from everybody in my survey, 192. So 24 out of 192 gives me 0.125. Moving on to Part D. Part D says, find the probability that a randomly selected musician from the survey plays guitar or studied in school. So this one we've got an or here, which means we're going to have to use one of our probability formulas that we talked about in the last section. So we want probability of A or B is equal to probability of A plus probability of B minus probability of A or B. So I need to find these probabilities separately. So let's talk about the probability that they play guitar first. The probability that they play guitar, and we can actually use the work that we did above, the probability that they play guitar was 59 out of 192. So 59 out of 192 plus the probability that they studied in school. That was from Part A. The probability that they studied in school was 95 out of 192, minus the probability that they both played guitar and studied in school. Well, we found that in Part C. That was 24 out of 192. Oops, 24 out of 192. So I just have a bit of addition and subtraction. So 59 plus 95 minus 24 gives me 130 individuals out of 192, or if I wanted to give a decimal, as I often do, I have 0.6771 as my decimal there. So there is my probability for Part D. And then lastly, one more for good measure. Find the probability that a randomly selected musician from the survey plays piano and was self-taught. Now, I want to mention this. I didn't mention this in Part C above, but I don't really need to use a formula for the and probability here for two reasons. First of all, the and probability that we talked about in the last section only works if we have independent events. And I'm going to kind of spoil ahead here. These are not actually independent events. We don't know that for certain, so we can't use that formula. But what's nice is I can go ahead and I can say, And actually, I already forgot. Plays piano and was self-taught. I don't really need to use a formula because I can just look at directly, here's the individuals that play piano, here's the individuals that were self-taught. So there are only 10 individuals that play both piano and were self-taught. So I don't really need to use a formula here. Sometimes it's nice to be able to use them, but I will also admit that sometimes we don't have to use them, particularly if we have a contingency table like this. A lot of times I won't bother with the formulas. We don't really need to. So we have 10 self-taught piano players out of a total of, again, 192 individuals from my sample. So 10 out of 192 gives me 0.0521 if I round to 4 decimal places. So hopefully this feels pretty familiar because we're going to be using a lot of these skills moving into our next section as we talk about conditional probability.